For 52 years, the world has speculated about what really happened on the night Bruce Lee died. Official reports claimed that it was a tragic accident, nothing more. But whispers of a cover-up, hidden truths, and a scandalous secret have never faded. At the center of it all was Betty Tingpe, the actress whose name would forever be tied to Bruce Lee's final moments. For decades, she denied the rumors, avoided the questions, and let history tell its own version of the truth, until now. At 77 years old, Betty has finally broken her silence by confirming what many have suspected, but never proven. The truth about Bruce Lee's death is far more complex than anyone imagined, and what she reveals about that night and the powerful figures who tried to control the story will change everything. What really happened on July 20, 1973? And why is she speaking now? The last confession. For half a century, the circumstances of Bruce Lee's death have remained one of Hollywood's and Hong Kong's most enduring mysteries. Officially, the world was told it was a tragic accident, nothing but an allergic reaction to painkillers and a case of cerebral edema. But from the moment the news broke, something about the story never quite added up. Now, 52 years later, Betty Tingpe, the woman at the center of it all, is finally ready to talk. At 77 years old, Betty has lived in the shadow of Bruce Lee's death. Overnight, she went from a rising actress to a controversial figure, whispered about in tabloids. Some fans have blamed her, and even suspect her of being part of a grand conspiracy. The accusations, the rumors, and the relentless media scrutiny shaped the rest of her life. Yet, through it all, she remained silent and never fully confirmed or denied the stories that condemned her, until now. In a rare interview, Betty has finally spoken about what really happened in her apartment that night in 1973, and what she revealed is more shocking than anyone imagined. It's a truth that not only challenges the official story, but also exposes the hidden forces that worked to control Bruce Lee's legacy. Because Bruce Lee was more than just a martial artist or a movie star, he was a threat. At the time of his death, he was at the peak of his career, and he was revolutionizing cinema by challenging Hollywood's long-standing barriers for Asian actors. He was young, seemingly invincible, and on the verge of superstardom. To some, he was a hero. To others, he was a problem. A man with too much power, too much influence. So when news broke of his sudden passing, the world refused to believe it was as simple as the official reports claimed. How does a 32-year-old man, who seemed to be in his physical prime, die so unexpectedly in the middle of the day? And why was he at Betty Tingpe's apartment when it happened? The Hong Kong press was relentless in publishing endless theories about poisonings, secret assassinations, and even supernatural curses. Fans were convinced there was more to the story. Even Lee's closest associates, including his wife Linda and longtime friend Raymond Chow, seemed to beat around the bush and offer vague explanations that left more questions than answers. But behind the scenes, the real reason for the secrecy was something far more calculated. According to Betty, powerful figures in the Hong Kong film industry, including Bruce Lee's own business partners, had a big interest in controlling how his death was perceived. If the real cause of his death was exposed, it could ruin reputations, destroy financial deals, and unleash a scandal that no one was ready for. And for years, Betty was forced to play along. She knew that speaking out could cost her everything. But now, she no longer cares about the consequences. Because the world deserves the truth, the real truth. What really happened in Betty's apartment that night? And why has she chosen to reveal it after all these years? The truth is darker than anyone ever imagined. Before Bruce, who was Betty Tingpe? Long before Betty Tingpe became known as the woman at the center of Bruce Lee's final moments, she was already a rising star in her own right. Born on February 19, 1947 in Taipei, Taiwan, Betty came from a traditional family that was deeply rooted in the medical profession. Her father was a respected doctor, and her upbringing was strict. Her conservative family had expectations that she would follow a respectable, conventional path, far from the chaos of fame. But Betty had different ambitions. Even as a child, she was drawn to the glamour and excitement of the entertainment industry. Taiwan in the 1950s was far from being a global entertainment hub. But Hong Kong was booming. The film industry, fueled by the success of Shaw Brothers and Golden Harvest, was rapidly expanding, and Betty was determined to be part of it. Plus, Betty's beauty and charisma didn't go unnoticed. She entered the entertainment world as a teenager and landed small modeling and acting gigs in Taiwan. But it wasn't until she moved to Hong Kong in the late 1960s that her career truly took off. Betty was signed by Golden Harvest, which was the film studio that would later produce Bruce Lee's most famous movies. Under the mentorship of the studio's head, Raymond Chow, she quickly gained recognition. She starred in numerous Hong Kong films, often playing seductive and mysterious roles that capitalized on her striking looks. By the early 1970s, Betty had become a well-known actress in the Hong Kong film circuit. She appeared in many big movies, from martial arts films to dramas and romance movies. But while her career was on the rise, the roles she played began shaping a perception of her that would later prove impossible to escape. She was cast as the femme fatale, the alluring yet dangerous woman, always at the center of power, desire, and deception. This wasn't just a character, it became her public identity. By the time Bruce Lee entered her life, the press had already crafted a narrative around her. She was the temptress, the woman whose presence could bring both passion and peril. Whether this image was true or not hardly mattered because public perception had already been shaped. And when Bruce Lee died in her apartment, it wasn't just a tragedy, it was the beginning of a scandal. Betty Tingpe, the rising star, was no longer just an actress. She became the woman with secrets, the woman who knew more than she was saying, the woman who, for decades, held the one truth the world was desperate to hear. And now, after 52 years, she's finally ready to reveal it. Bruce Lee's final year, the legend before the fall. In his final year, Bruce Lee was more than just an actor. He was a global phenomenon. He had revolutionized martial arts cinema, broken racial barriers in Hollywood, and become a symbol of strength, discipline, and excellence. But beneath the image of the untouchable warrior, Bruce was still a man. He battled exhaustion, injuries, and the immense pressure of living up to his own legend. By 1973, Bruce Lee was at the peak of his fame. That year, he dined at the Hyatt Regency in Hong Kong with his wife, Linda Lee, and his close friend and business partner, Raymond Chow. It was during this seemingly casual evening that he was introduced to Betty Tingpe. At the time, Betty was an actress working under Golden Harvest, the studio that had helped propel Bruce's career to new heights. Their initial meeting was professional. But what started as a simple acquaintance would soon evolve into something much deeper, something neither of them could have predicted. Though their interactions remained businesslike in public, rumors would later suggest there was more going on behind closed doors. Speculation surrounding their relationship persisted for years. Was it merely a friendship, or was there something more? Now, after decades of secrecy, Betty Tingpe is finally breaking her silence. Her confession will rewrite everything the world thought it knew about Bruce Lee's final days. Bruce's rise to superstardom had been swift and relentless. After signing with Golden Harvest under Raymond Chow, he delivered a string of massive hits: The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon. By the time production on Enter the Dragon began in 1973, Bruce was no longer just a martial arts star. He was an unstoppable force. But that level of success came with immense pressure. While his career flourished, his personal life suffered. Bruce was married to Linda Lee Cadwell, and together they had 2 children, Brandon and Shannon Lee. However, his job required him to spend extended periods of time away from his family. On top of that, he was pushing his body to its limits. Known for his legendary work ethic, Bruce trained obsessively, often restricting himself to just 1 meal a day to maintain his lean physique. He experimented with supplements, painkillers, and diuretics, believing they would enhance his performance. By the spring of 1973, his body began showing signs of strain. In May, he collapsed while working on Enter the Dragon. He suffered seizures and was rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered brain swelling. Though he recovered, the incident was a clear warning, one that neither he nor those around him fully heeded. As Bruce continued to push forward, rumors about his relationship with Betty Tingpe grew. To the public, she was just another actress set to appear in Game of Death, his next ambitious project. But behind closed doors, whispers circulated that their connection was more personal. When Bruce was spotted visiting Betty's apartment, it was always explained away as work. Yet in his final weeks, he was seen in her company more frequently, a detail that would become one of the most controversial aspects of his death. As all this went on, Bruce's health reportedly continued to suffer. He was losing weight at an alarming rate, often appearing exhausted and in pain. Some of his closest friends recalled him complaining of severe headaches, but he dismissed any concerns. The pressure to maintain his status, to prove himself in Hollywood, and to control his legacy drove him forward, no matter the cost. Then, on July 20, 1973, Bruce Lee walked into the apartment of Betty Tingpe for what should have been a routine visit. But he never walked out. For decades, the world has speculated about what really happened that day. Now, after 52 years of silence, Betty Tingpe is finally revealing the truth, a revelation that will change everything we thought we knew about Bruce Lee's death. The night Bruce Lee died. Bruce Lee's sudden death on July 20, 1973, sent shockwaves across the world. At just 32 years old, the martial arts legend who had defeated opponents both on screen and in real life was gone in an instant. But while the public mourned behind the scenes, a carefully managed cover-up was already in motion. The details of Bruce Lee's final moments were quickly altered, manipulated, and concealed. What really happened in Betty Tingpe's apartment that night? According to the initial report, Bruce Lee was at Betty Tingpe's apartment in Kowloon that evening. Betty was a known acquaintance of Bruce, and they were reportedly discussing her role in his upcoming film, Game of. At some point in the evening, Bruce complained of a severe headache. Betty, trying to help, gave him a painkiller called Equagesic. Equagesic is a combination of aspirin and a muscle relaxant commonly used at the time. After taking the pill, Bruce laid down to rest in her bedroom. But he never woke up. Betty grew concerned when Bruce wouldn't respond to her attempts to wake him. According to the official report, she panicked and called Raymond Chow, Bruce's close friend and business partner. Chow rushed over, but by then, Bruce was completely unresponsive. An ambulance was finally called, and Bruce was taken to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. But it was too late. The doctors pronounced him dead on arrival. The official cause was said to be cerebral edema, or brain swelling, allegedly triggered by an allergic reaction to the Equagesic pill. But for many, this explanation was far too simple for such a sudden and shocking death. For the 26-year-old Betty Tingpe, that night was a nightmare. One moment she was having what she thought was a normal evening with Bruce Lee. Next, she was sitting in an apartment with the lifeless body of the most famous martial artist in the world. She later described feeling utterly helpless as she watched Bruce lie motionless. She didn't even know what to do, as her attempt to wake him failed. When Raymond Chow arrived, she expected him to take charge, but instead, there was panic, indecision, and fear. Instead of immediately alerting authorities, Chow delayed calling for an ambulance. Why the delay? Some speculate that Chow and others present were trying to remove any incriminating evidence from the scene before emergency responders arrived. Others believe they were deciding how to protect Bruce's public image. Later, the media reversed its initial statements about Bruce's death, claiming that he had collapsed at home with his wife, Linda Lee, by his side. It was only later that the truth about his presence in Betty Tingpe's apartment came out. This sparked rumors and wild speculation. The shift in the narrative fueled suspicions, as people reasoned that there was nothing to hide. So why lie? Then, in an instant, Betty went from friend to suspect. The public blamed her and accused her of drugging Bruce. She had no time to process what had happened before the world turned against her. Over 50 years later, Betty has finally broken her silence. But why now? And what did she reveal that had been hidden for decades? The storm after Bruce's death, accusations and scandals. Bruce Lee's death was not just a tragedy. It became a sensationalized scandal that tore through the media like a wildfire. Within hours of the news breaking, the world wanted answers, and Betty Tingpe found herself at the center of a storm that she never could have prepared for. From the moment it was revealed that Bruce died in Betty's apartment, the media pounced on the story, twisting facts, exaggerating details, and fueling wild speculation. Instead of seeing Betty as a shocked and grieving witness, reporters painted her as a seductive mistress, a reckless lover, or worse, the culprit. Some headlines claimed that Bruce died in a compromising situation, implying that his death was the result of an affair gone wrong. Others went further by outright blaming Betty for his death and questioning what kind of woman would give a man a pill without knowing its effects. The Hong Kong tabloids were especially ruthless. They treated Betty's private life as a public trial, with reporters camped outside her home, photographers chasing her through the streets, and journalists demanding a confession she could never give. With so many unanswered questions, conspiracy theories began to spread like wildfire. Some of the most popular theories included: 1. Betty poisoned Bruce. Many fans couldn't believe that a single equagesic pill could take the life of someone as strong and disciplined as Bruce Lee. Rumors spread that Betty had laced his drink or food with poison, possibly following the orders of a powerful enemy. This brings us to the second major conspiracy theory: the Triads, Hong Kong's infamous organized crime groups that had a strong grip on the film industry. Some believed Bruce had angered the wrong people, and Betty was either used as bait or unknowingly gave him a fatal dose of something far deadlier than a painkiller. Another theory was that his death was a delayed revenge plot. It was suggested that Bruce had made too many enemies, especially in the martial arts world. Some believed he had been secretly poisoned days earlier, with Betty's apartment being a convenient place for him to collapse. The most outlandish theory of all was that a curse killed him. Many believed Bruce's sudden collapse was part of a family curse, the same one that would later claim his son, Brandon Lee, who died under mysterious circumstances on the set of The Crow in 1993. The emergence of these numerous theories did not clear Betty's name, though. Instead, the public turned against her completely, and her life became a nightmare. People mocked her in the streets, called her a seductress, and accused her of taking the life of a legend. She received countless death threats, some from obsessed Bruce Lee fans and others from anonymous sources. She started to wonder if she was really a part of something bigger. As a result, she became a prisoner in her own home and avoided public places. She even began losing work as producers would rather not be associated with the woman blamed for Bruce Lee's death. Despite the accusations, Betty refused to fight back publicly. For decades, she neither confirmed nor denied the romantic rumors. When asked about her relationship with Bruce, she avoided direct questions in interviews by giving vague answers, or saying she would rather not say bad things about the dead. Many believe she stayed quiet because she knew more than she let on. Perhaps she had witnessed something she was afraid to talk about. Some industry insiders concluded that she wanted to protect Bruce's image, even at the cost of her own reputation. But now, at 77 years old, Betty Tingpe confirmed the truth. What did she have to say after 5 decades of silence? And will her words finally put the mystery to rest, or stir up even more questions? The truth revealed. Betty confirms the romance. For decades, Betty Tingpe dodged the question. Every time an interviewer pried, she would shift the conversation, offer a vague answer, or insist that she and Bruce were just friends. But now, in her later years, Betty has finally confirmed what many had suspected all along. She and Bruce Lee were lovers. In a rare interview, Betty Tingpe finally admitted that Bruce Lee was more than just a friend or co-star. He was her lover. After years of denial, she revealed that their relationship was deep, intimate, and emotional. According to sources close to Betty, she described Bruce as a man who carried an unbearable weight on his shoulders. He was constantly under pressure from Hollywood, from Hong Kong, from his family, and from the industry that had built him up only to push him to his limits. She painted a picture of Bruce not as the fearless martial artist the world admired, but as a man who was tired, burdened, and always looking over his shoulder. She reportedly told an insider that he was always afraid, not afraid of fighting or of pain, but afraid of failure. He was afraid of disappointing the world, but in her presence, he let his guard down. According to leaked reports, Betty described herself as Bruce's safe space, the one place where he could be himself, free from the expectations of his career, his fans, and his family. When he was with her, he wasn't Bruce Lee, the legend. He was just Bruce. However, the most shocking revelation about Bruce Lee was not only that he and Betty were lovers, but that his entire death was covered up for public relations purposes. Now that Betty has spoken up, the world is forced to rethink everything about Bruce Lee's legacy. The final moments. What really happened that night. For years, the world only knew the official version. Bruce Lee complained of a headache, took a pill, went to lie down, and never woke up. But now, with the truth finally out, the secret romance, his health struggles, and the attempted cover-up, a more unsettling picture emerges. According to sources, Betty Tingpe has always been haunted by Bruce's final hours. He wasn't just feeling unwell. He looked troubled and distant, as if something was weighing on him. Betty reportedly told an insider that Bruce kept looking at her, like he wanted to say something important. But every time he opened his mouth, he'd stop, shake his head, and brush it off. It was more than just a headache. According to Betty, Bruce was restless. His hands were trembling slightly as he rubbed his temples. He paced the room, muttering to himself in Cantonese something about stress, pressure, maybe even fear. Then suddenly he sat down and grabbed her hand, but before he said what was really on his mind, he sighed, forced a weak smile, and changed the subject. Betty never pressed him, and that has haunted her for 52 years. What was he trying to tell me? She asked herself many times. Why didn't I convince him to say it? Moments later, he complained of a headache. Then she gave him an Equagesic pill. He had taken it before, so it was not expected to be dangerous. For decades, the events that followed have remained a mystery. What we do know is this: Bruce Lee did not die instantly. Betty thought he was sleeping, but as time passed, she noticed something was wrong. He was breathing more slowly, and his body felt strangely motionless. Instead of calling for emergency help, Betty first reached out to Chow, Bruce's longtime business partner. Why? According to leaked reports, she panicked, and Chow told her to wait until he arrived, and it took hours before he was taken to the hospital. By the time Bruce was finally rushed to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, it was too late. Why the delay? Why wasn't an ambulance called the moment he became unresponsive? Some believe Chow was more concerned with Bruce's image than saving his life. Others suspect there were attempts to revive him privately before involving the authorities. Whatever the case, the missing hours remain one of the most suspicious and tragic aspects of his death. As soon as Bruce's death was confirmed, the cover-up began. Raymond Chow immediately controlled the narrative. The press was told Bruce collapsed at home, with Linda by his side. At first, Linda Lee Cadwell, Bruce's wife, went along with the story. Some believe she did it to protect his legacy and their children. Betty was erased from the original version of the story. She was suddenly a footnote in the greatest martial artist's death and his final hours, rewritten to make his passing look peaceful and dignified. When talking about Raymond Chow's lies, Betty is said to have said, "He was disgusting." Yet, she had no choice but to go along with it. She was alone, and he told her what to say. She had no power to fight it. As time passed, the police eventually unraveled the real truth. Bruce Lee died in Betty's house. And if not for the police investigation, these facts would have never been revealed. The police concluded that Raymond Chow came to Betty's apartment and attempted to call Bruce's personal doctor at least 20 times. After failing to connect with the doctor, Raymond then called Betty's personal doctor, who arrived 20 minutes later. He examined Bruce and detected no heartbeat or breathing. After attempting CPR, he called for an ambulance. Lee did not arrive at the hospital until 6 hours after he took a pain pill provided by Betty and laid down to take a nap. The coroner described his passing as death by misadventure. Why Betty speaks now. For over 5 decades, Betty Tingpe has lived with the weight of that night. The questions, the guilt, the regret. He was trying to tell me something, and I didn't listen, she said in a private interview. Now Betty wonders if Bruce knew something was wrong. She believes that maybe if she had called for help sooner, he'd still be here. The truth is, no one will ever know. But what is certain is that Bruce Lee's final moments were not the peaceful passing of a Hollywood icon, but the quiet, tragic death of a man who had been carrying too much for too long. For years, Betty had no choice but to deny everything, and for good reasons. She was pressured by the industry, especially by powerful figures like Raymond Chow, who warned her that confirming a romance with Bruce would ruin her career. She also feared public backlash, knowing that Bruce's fans worshipped him as a devoted family man. And she respected Bruce's wife, Linda. She would rather not be remembered as the woman who tarnished his legacy. But now, after 5 decades of silence, she no longer cares about the backlash. Betty's confession rewrites history. Bruce Lee's death was not just a tragic accident, but a carefully controlled narrative. For decades, the world believed Bruce died as a family man as a result of a fatal medication reaction. But the truth is far messier, darker, and more complicated. He was in the apartment of his secret lover. His death was not immediately reported, and his final days were filled with exhaustion, fear, and the overwhelming burden of fame. For 52 years, the world believed one story. But now Betty Tingpe's truth has changed everything. What do you think about Betty's confessions? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.